Halloween wasn't just a low-budget slasher, it was a genre-defining fever dream stitched together with duct tape, desperation, and raw cinematic nerve. What looked like a sleek, terrifying classic on screen was barely holding together behind the camera. We're talking a cast who wore their own clothes, a villain born from a $2 mask, and a director who scored the film in just 3 days. This is the unpolished, untold truth behind the scream. These are 20 weird facts about Halloween that even horror diehards don't know. And just wait until the bonus fact. It involves an uncredited master of suspense that nobody saw coming. Let's pull back the sheet. 1. Michael Myers' mask cost $1.98, and it wasn't supposed to be scary. The most iconic mask in horror history? It came from a thrift store on Hollywood Boulevard. Production designer Tommy Lee Wallace bought a William Shatner Captain Kirk mask for just under $2. To make it frightening, they widened the eye holes and painted it white. That blank, emotionless stare wasn't a designer's plan. It was an accident. Wallace later said, "The emptiness of the expression was exactly what we needed. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad, it was just nothing." The filmmakers tried other masks, including a clown version, but nothing creeped people out like Shatner's deathly stare. What audiences didn't know is that Michael Myers was wearing the face of Star Trek's most beloved captain, just repurposed into pure nightmare fuel. 2. Jamie Lee Curtis got the part because of her mother's Scream Queen legacy. Jamie Lee Curtis was just 19 and had never acted in a movie when she auditioned for Halloween. But what caught producer Deborah Hill's attention? Her last name. Jamie's mother was Janet Leigh, famous for her blood-curdling shower scene in Psycho. Hill and Carpenter felt casting Janet Leigh's daughter was a poetic nod to horror history. But Curtis still had to earn it. She gave a performance so grounded it gave the chaos around her emotional weight. She brought vulnerability but also strength, Carpenter said. By the end of the shoot, she wasn't just a newbie. They had unknowingly created the first true final girl. Not nepotism, but cinematic destiny. 3. Donald Pleasence took the role for his daughter. Donald Pleasence, the classically trained British actor with Bond villain cred, seemed an odd choice for a low-budget horror film. So why did he say yes? Because his daughter was a fan of Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, and begged him to take the role. Pleasence didn't understand the script, he admitted as much, but he believed in Carpenter. What he brought was gravitas, his performance as Doctor. Loomis added psychological depth to the film's supernatural fear. Without him, Halloween might have just been a teenage slasher. With him, it became something mythic, a battle between good and unstoppable evil. 4. The film had no budget for a score, so Carpenter did it himself. Most horror films hire orchestras or composers. Carpenter had a synth and 3 days. That's it. With limited resources, he leaned into minimalism. He wrote the now iconic 5/4 piano riff inspired by his father's rhythm exercises. The result? A haunting, pulsing dread that became Halloween's heartbeat. Critics at the time didn't even mention the music, but audiences couldn't forget it. Carpenter later said, "If you can't afford to show fear, you have to make them hear it." Not just a cost-saving measure, the score helped define modern horror soundtracks and is still imitated decades later. 5. Michael Myers' name came from a real person. Michael Myers wasn't just pulled from thin air. The name came from a real-life British distributor of Assault on Precinct 13. As a thank you, Carpenter used Michael Myers as the name for the shape, the film's faceless killer. But the real Myers had no idea until the film's release. Imagine hearing your own name associated with a silent, unstoppable killer. It wasn't personal, it was practical. 6. The whole movie was shot in just 20 days. Most films take months. Halloween took 20 days. With a budget of only $300,000, Carpenter had to move fast. The crew worked 6 days a week, shooting up to 13 pages of script a day. Actors often changed clothes in cars, and locations were redressed to look like different homes. To make it worse, they were filming spring in California and pretending it was October in Illinois. No fall leaves? They painted fake ones and reused them for every take. Every corner cut was a gamble. But that pressure? It created the gritty, urgent feel that made Halloween feel so terrifyingly real. 7. The Steadicam shots were groundbreaking and improvised. The film opens with a chilling point-of-view shot of young Michael committing his first murder. Today, it's considered one of the greatest Steadicam sequences in horror history. But at the time, Steadicam rigs were expensive. Instead, the crew used a Panelide rig and rehearsed the shot for hours. Cinematographer Dean Cundy helped block the entire scene without cuts, giving the audience the killer's literal point of view. It wasn't just stylish, it made the horror personal. The audience didn't just watch Michael kill, they became him. 8. Many actors wore their own clothes, including Jamie Lee Curtis. With no costume budget, the cast often brought their own wardrobe. Jamie Lee Curtis famously bought Laurie Strode's entire outfit from J.C. Penney for under $100. Other cast members wore whatever they had in their closet. This forced realism worked in the film's favor. The characters didn't look like they were in a movie. They looked like people you went to high school with. That grounded authenticity helped sell the terror. You weren't watching movie victims. You were watching your classmates, your friends, your babysitter. And it made everything feel 10 times scarier. 9. John Carpenter saw Michael Myers as a force, not a person. In Carpenter's eyes, Michael wasn't a man. He was the embodiment of pure evil. In the script, he's referred to not by name, but as the Shape. He wanted Myers to be a blank slate. No backstory, no motive, no emotion. The less you know, the scarier he becomes, Carpenter said. That philosophy set Halloween apart from other slashers that leaned heavily on exposition. The terror wasn't in understanding Michael, it was in not understanding him at all. A blank face in the dark hallway, breathing heavily, stepping silently. That's all you needed to feel dread. 10. The blood in Halloween? Practically non-existent. Despite being called a slasher, Halloween has almost no blood. There's very little gore. Most kills happen off-screen or with minimal effects. Why? Budget constraints, but also psychological horror. Carpenter knew that what you imagine is more terrifying than what you see. The suspense came from staging, music, and timing. The audience fills in the blanks. Ironically, later horror films would up the gore to match Halloween, without realizing its power came from restraint. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we've got 10 more Twisted Truths coming up, and they're only getting darker from here. 11. The crew used the same handful of fall leaves over and over. You'd never know it, but Halloween was filmed in sunny Pasadena, California. And it definitely wasn't autumn. There were no red or golden leaves on the ground. So production designer Deborah Hill and her team painted thousands of paper leaves and scattered them across lawns and sidewalks. After each take, they'd collect every single one and reuse them in the next shot. In one infamous moment, you can even spot palm trees in the background, something Illinois doesn't have. But nobody noticed at the time. Why? Because the illusion was that strong. A few painted leaves turned California into Haddonfield. 12. Carpenter didn't want a sequel. He thought the story was done. After the smash success of Halloween, producers begged for a sequel, but Carpenter was reluctant. He never intended Halloween to be a franchise. To him, the story was simple. Evil appears, terrorizes, and vanishes. Done. When he finally agreed to write Halloween II, he admitted to feeling stuck. I had no idea what to write, he confessed, so I made up the family connection between Laurie and Michael. That twist, that they're siblings, became central to the sequels. But Carpenter later called it a mistake, saying it boxed in the story. Not expansion, but compromise. The boogeyman should have stayed a mystery. 13. The sound of Michael's knife? A kitchen knife stabbing a watermelon. Foley artists had to get creative. There was no budget for fancy sound libraries or elaborate sound stages. So to create the unsettling slice of Michael's knife entering flesh, they stabbed watermelons over and over. The result? A squishy, wet crunch that sounds sickeningly real. Sometimes they used cantaloupes. Sometimes they mixed in audio from butcher shops. The goal was to make every kill feel visceral, even if you couldn't see it. That one sound, the quiet violence of it, made audiences flinch, and they never even knew it came from fruit salad. 14. Nick Castle played Michael Myers. And didn't act at all. Nick Castle wasn't an actor. He was Carpenter's college buddy visiting the set to watch. But when Carpenter needed someone to wear the mask and move like the Shape, he asked Castle to step in. His only direction? Just walk. That's it. No backstory, no emotion, no horror training. Castle later said he based Michael's walk on a blank curiosity, like someone watching ants. His understated robotic movement became the standard for slasher villains. Jason, Ghostface, even Leatherface owe a debt to Castle's calm, inhuman pacing. It wasn't performance, it was presence. 15. Carpenter and Hill wrote the script in under 2 weeks. Speed was the name of the game. With producers eager to get the film made quickly and cheaply, Carpenter and Deborah Hill locked themselves in a room and wrote the script in just 10 days. Hill focused on the teenage girl's dialogue, drawing from her own high school experiences, while Carpenter built the structure around suspense and visual horror. Their divide-and-conquer method worked. The result was a tight, efficient screenplay that wastes no time. Every line serves the mood. Every scene builds tension, not a rushed job, but a surgical strike of horror writing. 16. The film's working title was The Babysitter Murders. Before Halloween became Halloween, it had a much more generic name, The Babysitter Murders. The original concept was a series of murders over several nights, with different girls in different homes. But producer Irwin Yablans had a better idea. Set the entire film on one night, Halloween, and condense the tension. The new title wasn't just catchy, it instantly set a mood, a holiday, and a fear that every kid understood. Suddenly, the horror had context. It wasn't just about slashing, it was about the fear that something evil could come home with you on the spookiest night of the year. 17th. Carpenter had to fight for Final Cut, despite the tiny budget. Even with such a low budget, Carpenter wasn't just handed creative control. Producer Mustafa Akkad wanted changes, faster pacing, more scares, tighter edits. Carpenter pushed back. He believed in the slow burn, the creeping dread. In post-production, he re-edited scenes himself and adjusted the timing of scares. He also layered in his now legendary score, which turned many test screenings around. One executive said, "Without the music, it's nothing." Carpenter's insistence on atmosphere over action saved the film. Not compromise, but conviction. Halloween became a masterclass in mood because its director refused to cut corners. 18. The Shape's breathing was recorded by the actor, in post. One of the creepiest parts of Michael Myers is his breathing, slow, heavy, almost mechanical. But that wasn't recorded live. Nick Castle added the breathing in post-production, standing in a sound booth with the mask on, mimicking the slow rise and fall of breath. The muffled, almost claustrophobic quality gave Michael an eerie sense of presence, even when he wasn't visible. You heard him before you saw him. It became a defining trait of the character. That breath told you he was alive, watching, waiting. 19. Michael Myers doesn't run, and that was intentional. Unlike later horror villains who sprint or chase, Michael Myers walks, slowly, deliberately, always. Carpenter made that decision early on. He believed that true evil doesn't need to rush. Michael's stillness made him scarier. Victims could run, scream, and beg, but he always caught up because he wasn't chasing them. He was inevitable. This slow, inescapable death gave the film its mythic quality. 20th Halloween was dismissed by critics until it became a sensation. When Halloween opened in 1978, critics didn't love it. Some called it derivative, cheap, or juvenile. The LA Times wrote that it had no redeeming social value. But word of mouth changed everything. Audiences packed theaters. The scares were real. and by the time the New York Times critic Vincent Canby praised it as a minor classic, it had already grossed $70 million on a $300,000 budget. It became the most profitable independent film of its time. Not overnight success, but grassroots legend. And soon, even the critics had to admit, Halloween had carved itself into history. Bonus fact: Alfred Hitchcock inspired more than just Janet Leigh's casting. He influenced the whole movie. Carpenter worshipped Hitchcock, not just for Psycho, but for how he built suspense. He even studied Psycho's shot structure and pace before making Halloween. The influence is everywhere: the voyeuristic camera, the slow burn tension, the absence of blood. Carpenter once said, "I learned more from watching Hitchcock's films than any film school." Even the casting of Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't just legacy, it was a full-circle nod to the master. So in a way, Halloween is the ghost of Psycho, dressed in a new mask. Not imitation, but reincarnation. Halloween was supposed to be disposable, a cheap scare flick to fill drive-in seats. Instead, it reinvented horror. It gave birth to the slasher genre, turned a $300,000 risk into a $70 million empire, and redefined how fear could be filmed. All from a painted Shatner mask, a 10-day script, and a synth riff written in 5/4 time. The real boogeyman? It wasn't the killer behind the mask, it was how close this masterpiece